Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to let everybody just sign on and we'll start in 1 minute. All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is David Fulford, and I'm the CEO here at IPAC, the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. We're thrilled that you can join us for today's session. Before we begin, I would like to read a land acknowledgement. With participants joining virtually from coast to coast, we acknowledge and respect the ancestral and unceded territories of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We encourage everyone here to take the opportunity to learn about the diverse and unique histories, cultures, and aspirations of the peoples whose territories you work and live. And we ask you all to determine how you can take action towards reconciliation. All right, I think you all hopefully know that IPAC is the largest professional association of public servants in Canada with chapters across our great country. We also have a journal that we publish on a quarterly basis. And if you haven't seen it lately, I encourage you to take a look at it. There are great stories in the journal from academics and practitioners about public administration across Canada. Now, as part of our commitment to public servants and excellence, we are thrilled to welcome you to the third session of our learning series, Navigating AI, a Practical Guide for Public Servants. This series was created to equip public servants with the insights and tools needed to understand and engage with artificial intelligence in a meaningful and responsible way. To date, we've trained over 10,000 public servants, and our goal is to try to get to 20. And we're making great progress with that with our current English and our French sessions. In our first session, we explored the foundations of AI literacy, what it is, how it works, and why it is so relevant to the future of public sector strategy, innovation, and governance. Last week, we focused on practical applications with a session entitled AI Tools to Boost Productivity. We looked at how AI can support you in your day-to-day work to help you to be more efficient, organized, and impactful. Today, we're going to dive even deeper with a session on how we can effectively use AI in a session entitled The Art of Prompt Engineering. We'll explore how to communicate effectively with AI tools to get better, more accurate, and more creative results. This session is all about unlocking the full potential of AI by learning how to ask the right questions in the right way. We're pleased to have Idris Belmojini, who is going to be our guest speaker. But before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded, and recordings will be made available for viewing for a limited time. And of course, if you miss a session or you have to leave early, you can watch it later. If you have a colleague who couldn't make it, let them know the sessions are being recorded and they're available. If you have questions throughout the session, please use the Q&A function. Don't put your questions into the chat. Our team is focused on the Q&A box, and we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can. Questions will be addressed during the dedicated Q&A period, and we will also try and answer them throughout this session. We have almost 5,000 participants joining us, and many of you will have great questions, but we may not be able to get to all of them today. I do strongly encourage you to look at the Q&A document that is posted for your cohort, and in a moment, my staff will put it into the chat. This is based on questions from public servants across Canada for the previous 8 sessions of our program, and it will address many of the questions that you're asking. If you experience any technical difficulties, the IPAC team is in the chat and ready to assist you. Once you've completed the full series, you will receive the IPAC Certificate of Completion, which you can proudly display on your LinkedIn profile. As I mentioned earlier, if you miss a session, you can watch the video. Yes, we're tracking everyone, so we know when you have completed. So there's no need to reach out to us to ask us when you will get the certificate or to tell us that you missed a session. We will monitor and we'll let you know a few weeks after the final session when you can receive your certificate. Finally, unlike other large gatherings, we have committed to leave the chat open so that you can share your experiences and links with other public servants. And I do want to acknowledge staff from BC who at the last session shared some great links and their experiences, and we thank them for that. If you find the chat too distracting, you can mute it by clicking on the arrow next to the chat icon, select Hide Chat. Now, regarding the comments in the chat, I would like to thank everyone for supporting IPAC's commitment to providing a safe and respectful learning environment. Just as a reminder, if it's something that you would not say at work, then please don't put it into the chat. Thank you. We're thrilled to have you join us for this next session. And with that, Idris, over to you.
Thank you, David, for this great introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Idris. I'm a manager at KPMG in the data and AI practice, and I'm here today to talk to you about my favorite topic, prompt engineering. I'm sure everyone's heard about this buzzword. It is a science, it is an art, and today on the menu, we'll go over a few topics. The first being the basics of prompting with generative AI tools. So a lot of what you'll see today is applicable to most, if not all, of the generative AI tools you've heard or know about, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, Perplexity, DeepSeek, and such. We'll go over a few leading and good practices when crafting a prompt for a generative AI chatbot. And last but not least, we'll be taking a look at some more advanced techniques that we would call actually prompt engineering techniques. Before doing so, here we love democracy. We would love to get your take on a quick question on Menti. So if everyone could pull out your phones, scan the QR code in front of you, and you'll see a little question here about your current understanding of prompt engineering, just to get a little pulse of the group we have today. So I'll let everyone a few seconds, maybe a minute, to take out their phone, log in, and we'll then display the results and see what we have here today. All right, current state. From what I see, most people have a basic familiarity with prompt engineering. Very few expert level. Hopefully you'll learn a thing or two today. Quite a bit of no idea what it is. That's great. That's what we're here for today. But I see that's it's pretty much big majority having a basic familiarity with it. Let's stick for another 10, 15 seconds. Brilliant. I think that the trend is still going with basic familiarity. Second majority, no idea what it is. Great. We'll start from the basics then. All right, everyone. Thank you for playing along. Let's go back to prompt engineering. Brilliant. All right, let's start with the basic, everyone, of prompting with generative AI tool. First, most critical question, what is a prompt? It's essentially the query, the question, or the instruction that you ask your generative AI tool or chatbot. It's the basis from which it will try to answer your question, your query, or your tasks. And essentially, there's always a framework given the tool that you want to follow. We came up with 5 pillars for writing effective prompt that would work across the tools that you know. And there's not necessarily a single formula, but we have guiding principles. You'll see that each model, each tool behave differently. And what you want to do is try to follow some of those key pillars so that you get the best responses from any or most of the generative AI tools. The first three are the most recommended one. You want to state your objective, your goal in a precise manner. You want to state your context, providing relevant details to the objective. Then you're going to want to set some limits. We'll see that limits and boundaries come in different ways, shapes, or form, depending on the tool you're using. And the most helpful one, the tool at last, the expectations. Choosing your output format or writing style often comes at the end because generative AI tools, for most, tend to remember more what comes at the end. So if you have some expectations in terms of writing style, in terms of output or formatting, you're better off putting it at the end. And last but not least, testing. Generative AI tools are a new way to interact with technology. It's a whole new learning curve that will require you to reiterate and experiment with different approaches, different prompts, and we'll try today to illustrate how we can make that happen. So those 5 pillars will be displayed with an example, with a demonstration, and hopefully we'll be able to illustrate what each does. Starting with the first one, the objective. So key activities is, of course, defining what you want to do in as much as possible, clear and concise manner. You want your objective, if possible, to be measurable and, of course, achievable. It requires knowing the limitation of the tools. Otherwise, you'll have to test. And, of course, you want to review and adjust your objective as necessary. So in action, what it looks like is simply stating something that you would ask, for example, to a colleague. Let's say you want to generate a summary of something. You want to conduct an evaluation or an audit of something. You want to translate a text from French to English. Those are essentially clear objectives. Let's take a more personal example. Say we want to cook something at home. We want to start, say, a spaghetti bolognese. The objective is pretty clear. We want the AI tool to provide us with a detailed recipe for this. That would be the objective, clear and simple. Now for context. We want a context to provide the necessary background information for the objective to be reached. We want to avoid unnecessary details as to not confuse the AI. And again, you want to review and adjust the context if you see that the response is off track. So in action, that would look like, I work in the public health sector within the government or Canada, or I want to have a report drafted for the Ministry of XYZ. I want this year to be taken into account while spending remaining the same. So let's go back to a recipe. What this would look like is the context would be, I want to cook dinner tonight using only vegetarian ingredients. So this is a context that will help the objective to be reached with all the constraint you put in. Moving over to limits. Again, limits comes in different shape or in forms. You want to define limits to be as much as possible measurable and specific. And what you want to do is also monitor the output to make sure that it stays within the set limits. If ever it does not respect the constraints you've set, you can always call back, reiterate, and say, hey, the limit was not respected. Please reiterate, please review your response. And we'll see what this looks like in a demo in a short while. In action, you want to make it quantifiable. So let's say you want a summary of a document to not go beyond 200 words. Instead of saying not beyond 200 words, you will give it a range between 150 and 200. Why? Because, well, 5 is under 200, 10 is under 200. So you want to make sure that whenever you're setting those boundaries, as much as possible, you're giving it a range. Same when it comes to text. Let's say you want to translate something from English into French. You want it to maintain the original tone and style so it does not go off-road and pick a different style of writing. Let's go back to a recipe, everyone. What this look like? Simple example of limit. We don't want this recipe to be over 30 minutes, so we would say it should take no more than 30 minutes. See here, we're hitting 3 pillars already, and not even 1 or not even 2 full sentences. So we don't need to write a novel to write an effective prompt. You just need to know what you're trying to achieve and write it in a way so that the AI will comply. So right now we have a spaghetti bolognese recipe. We're asking to cook tonight, only for with vegetarian ingredient, should be less than 30 minutes. What's next? The expectations. You want to essentially cite which would be your desired format, which would be the desired tone. And, for the recipe, it might not be very applicable. In a work context, it could be, a little more interesting. But here, let's say, some of the example we have in terms of expectation for formatting, it could be bullet points, it could be a table, or it could just be, professional style or concise style of response. Here, we want to set an easy expectation for a recipe would be, for instance, that the instructions should be simple enough for a beginner to understand. So we won't be using any high-level cooking techniques. We just want to eat tonight a good spaghetti bolognese with some good ingredients that we have in the fridge in less than 30 minutes. So all of that, let's see what this looks like using one of the generative AI tools you might already know about, Copilot. Let's see. We're going to ask the question, the prompt at the bottom. Same prompt, provide a detailed recipe, and it will comply pretty much immediately. This first iteration is pretty complete. We can see that we have the instructions, the ingredient, the step-by-step, and the cumulative of the times it takes for each of those tasks is still under 30 minutes. So for now, it hits all of our targets. Let's say we want to make it a bit better. Well, then we have the option of testing something new. We can ask additional elements. We can remove or add details to the prompt, but in this context, we've prompted it once. Then we're going to prompt it something else following the first prompt. We want to add some consideration. For instance, we want more veggies. So let's say we just want a thicker sauce. You can ask the AI to do so. Here we have a recipe. You can ask, okay, well, how do I make the sauce thicker? It will give us some instructions. You'll notice that it's separate from the original recipe. Let's say we want to add even more vegetables compared to the original recipe. It will give us a list of additional vegetables we can add in. But here, now that you know this information, maybe we can create a new prompt, an updated prompt that takes into account what we've added from the get-go. Let's see what it looked like. We would start with the same prompt as we started with, provide a detailed recipe, should take no more than 30 minutes, and should be simple enough for beginners to understand. At the end of this first prompt, we would add the following. We want to include multiple vegetables for sweetness and instructions to make the sauce thick. And now you'll have an updated list of ingredients, and you'll have those new details or constraints directly added into your instruction. So here you can see that, okay, we've tried a first prompt, it was good. We added some constraints, some iteration until we arrived to a result that we thought, okay, now maybe my original prompt could be better. Open a new conversation. We'll see it's part of our leading practices that whenever you want to start from scratch, you want to open a new chat. In here, first shot, we're getting immediately the recipe that we want. We save it and bon appétit, everyone. So now that we've seen those critical pillars, in summary, those are the pillars you want to keep in mind that you want to, at the very least, have the first three always in your prompt. Objective, context, limits. You've seen that we don't need to write a novel, really. You want to add expectation if you know exactly what you're expecting. If not, it still remains optional. The testing as well is whenever you're not sure about the result, and oftentimes generative AI tools will not give you exactly what you want from the get-go. It might give you 80%, sometimes 50, sometimes 90, and that little delta is where you want to test and add some new elements so that the response is 100% up to your standards. So testing is really critical, I would say, especially whenever you're learning something new. You want to test, reiterate, share with colleagues, share with friends your result and see what they came up with so that their result was as good or maybe different.
Idris, do we want to take a couple questions?
Of course.
Okay, so first question, I think we may touch on this later, but being polite, thank yous and pleases in prompt engineering, does that help? Want to comment on that?
Absolutely. Well, I will quote some people that I think know better than me. That would be one of the lead designer of OpenAI, who built ChatGPT, as well as one of the lead developers for Copilot. And everyone agrees that being polite helps, simply because the type of data is trained on is pretty much already polite. It's positive. So it's like a sort of positive reinforcement. Whenever you're being polite, you're likely to have a more collaborative response, a response that is based on data that is already quote unquote polite, or at the very least neutral. So sometimes saying thanks or please will give you a little edge on the response. Not 100%, but we're talking about tendencies here. So I would say that most often, yes. And don't take my word for it. Look at the lead designer of the biggest solutions out there. Everyone agrees being polite works at giving you better response with more accuracy.
Works just in general, right, Idris, overall?
That's right. Stay.
Uh, next question, is the order of the pillars important? Can you switch them, or does that make a difference to the results you get?
You can switch them. You have ways of switching them, and we'll go over some of the techniques later on where context can be set at first before the objective. I would say to keep the expectation rather at the end and limits rather at the end, because the AI will tend to remember this formatting requirement at the end. So imagine you have a response, it will give you a lot of details, and at the end, you want this funnel to be formatted into something more specific. So you just want to make sure that at the very least, you keep expectation and limits towards the end.
And last question for now, any specific suggestions that are different than what we covered for prompting on creation of visuals or images in the tools that allow that?
Well, on that, I would follow the guidelines. You'll see that most of these tools have different guidelines for the model to perform in a way or another. And oftentimes, the manufacturer, it comes with a guide. So I would highly recommend following this. What you're seeing right now is rather for generative AI chatbots. So ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot, and Gemini from Google, and so on and so forth. But for other tools, take a look at the requirement and you'll see that it's stated pretty explicitly. They want the user experience to be great, so the documentation you will likely find.
Excellent. Okay, I'll let you get back to it for now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anita. All right, second course of our menu, some leading practices regarding prompt crafting, more specifically. Now we have another question for everyone. So if you don't mind pulling out your phone again, scan the QR code and please respond to the question here. You'll see that we're asking something rather specific for people who've used generative AI tools. We'd love to get your take on it. So leave you a couple of seconds to do so. You see some of the votes are coming in. We'll be sharing the result in a little bit. Thank you for playing along, everyone. Yeah, we're supposed to see the Menti result. It's actually loading. We see there's a lot of people. It may take a little while. And that you're able to see the results of the Menti on your end.
I see them and it says it's sharing, but it isn't. So we're gonna see how we can do that. Some people are seeing it, some people are not, but it's interesting. Do you
Almost
see them,
there.
Idris?
Not
If not, we
yet.
can go on and then we'll come back to it.
Sounds good. That's funny. A lot of people are seeing it. I'm not.
Mhm.
That's the beauty of live demos.
Let me try one more time and then we'll see if that works for you as well, because everybody else seems to be seeing it.
See, everyone, we're very far from technology replacing humans at this point.
Mhm.
There you go. Now we see
Third
them.
time's a charm.
Third time's a charm. Thank you. So, never get the information I'm seeking. I see some people ask, never used AI as not being an option. At this point, you don't have to answer. We just want to have a take on everyone who had the chance to essentially submit a prompt. So most of the time, sometimes the answer is close, but needs the refinement. And I think that's a huge majority of people. I would agree with that. Sometimes it's close. Most of the time it's close is the second majority. Perfect answer, very little. Never get the information, very little. So pretty even distribution. It's tending on the positive, I would say. So that's good news. All right, let's go back to our main presentation, everyone. Thanks for playing along again. Moving forward. So next course, prompt crafting with generative AI chatbot. We have a few leading practices or effective practices that we'd like you to keep in mind on top of the pillar you've seen. Pillars of framework, this is more specific. So first, you want to have a complete and detailed sentences. You want to write it as if you're writing to a colleague or someone new who just onboarded, someone very smart, just got out of school, who's brilliant, had a lot of knowledge, but does need a bit or rather a lot of guidance. So you make sure you have a complete and detailed sentence. If you have a few errors or vocabulary errors or grammatical errors, that's fine. But what you want to have as much as you can are specific settings when it comes to instructions. For instance, if you want a detailed response that is, limited to a certain number of words, you want to state so. You don't want to say, I want a short response. You rather want to say, I want a response within, say, 200 to 300 words. If you want to have an intro paragraph or 3 paragraphs or 10, you want to state that as well. Be as specific as you can, quantify whenever possible. And last but not least, you want to separate the instruction from the context when it's not too obvious. Let's say here, we want to analyze a budget report, and part of the context is we want to analyze a very specific chapter. We want to put this between brackets. So chapter 3, reducing the cost of living. Why? So that you avoid the confusion of the tool, just thinking that, it's part of the instruction. Sometimes that happens. Part of your context or titles could be interpreted as an instruction. So rather than not, you want to make sure that it's explicitly separated. Next is the iteration. It goes back to the pillar number 5 of testing, is that you want to keep on going. Sometimes the first response is not what you expected. Say the summary was too lengthy. Well, it's a conversational chatbot. You can just state it. So summary is too lengthy, shorten it between 100 and 200 words. Make it more formal, make it less formal, make it more concise. Add some bullet points. So you want to keep going and keep iterating until you get your result. And if all else fails, what you can do is, of course, reset the conversation. There are 2 reasons for which you want to reset the conversation, and you always have the option to add a new chat or start a new chat, whether it's on Copilot, ChatGPT, Perplexity, or the web version of Copilot. And what that does is create a second chat or a new chat. And it allows you to do two things. First is maybe reprompt something new, start from scratch. Let's say you've came up with, a new prompt that you think would be better off starting from scratch. You want to put a new chat. Second, whenever you're switching tasks, simply because most of those models, they remember the context of the conversation. So if you had multiple exchanges with your tool and you're up to, exchange number 10 or 15, if you're starting a new task, your tool may take the previous conversation or the conversation so far as part of the context for this new task. And oftentimes, it's not what you're trying to do. When you're opening something new, you want to start with a clear context, and build the interactions until you get to a point where there is enough context for you to do something more specific. And we'll see that we have some techniques that are very effective using this approach, but you want to keep in mind that resetting the conversation is a very, very good practice whenever you want to switch tasks or whenever you're not able to really get to where you want to get with a task because maybe a confusion built up. So keep that in mind and try to avoid as much as you can prompts like this. Tell me everything about the budget report. Tell me about my meeting this morning. I've had quite a few people had the chance to train with coming back with negative feedback because of a prompt like that, but you can see how that does not follow the effective practices we show. There is no context, there is no indication of the perfect output. It's just a couple of words, and the word like everything or all, tell me all about everything about, oftentimes is not very good for generative AI tools. Just gets them to be a bit too confused, if you ask me, and they will try to do as much as they can and come back with results that very little time are up to our standards. All right, everyone, we're getting to the fun part here, prompt engineering techniques. And this is a bit more advanced in the sense that we're using some techniques to make the model go towards a certain result, and it helps us play with the kind of constraints and limitation, and we'll explain why. And you'll see that prompt engineering techniques, you have a huge amount of those online, likely with different names, likely for different purposes, but we've selected for you the 6 most useful one that we had the chance to explore, and then try to explain to you how you can get the most out of each. So,
Idris, before we go
yes.
there, do we want to take just a couple more questions? We're
Yes,
getting a
great
lot of
idea.
activity, so great
Of
question.
course.
So just when you mentioned if you're, let's say, using multiple prompts and you want to go back to the results of a previous, let's say you're on prompt 7 and you want to go back to prompt 3, the results of prompt 3, is that possible?
It depends on the tool. Some of the prompts allow you to go back and modify prompt 3 or prompt 4. Others would not allow you to do this. It's really depending on the tool.
Okay. Another great question that we had come in terms of once you get, you're prompting, you're learning how to use the various tools, you get the results you want. Is it true and or effective if you ask the tool to essentially teach you how to prompt better in the future based on the final results that you got that you did want? How could I have prompted better, essentially? Can you ask the tool that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love this question, and you can ask it that way. You can ask it in a way that would say something like, how should I have prompted you for you to give me this response in the first place? So definitely you can close the loop by asking the AI tool that you're using, okay, this result at the end, what would have been the ideal prompt or series of prompt? Because sometimes, keep in mind, there's always an issue of capacity. Nothing is, everything is finite. So either you're asking for the perfect prompt for you to get to this result, or what would be the ideal series of prompt for you to get to this result, and say 2 to 3 prompt rather than 10 or 15. Great question. You can definitely do that.
Great. In terms of the limit, when you're talking about the limits, if you make the limit too restrictive, does the AI tool tell you that that is the case, or will it try to provide results regardless of how restrictive you make that limit?
It will try to provide result regardless, and that sometimes could lead to hallucination or just simply bad result or off-topic results. But most of the times, and again, it's depending on the tool. Some of them will just try to make it happen as much as they can, but then you can always prompt them to give you some reasoning as to why they give you this, try to shed a bit of light on this. But most of the time, even if it's limited, it will try its best without telling you it hit its limit.
Mm.
Sometimes they might. Sometimes they won't. Again, there's so many tools, it depends.
And I guess last question before we move on, punctuation or grammar, do those kind of things impact the results of the AI tools?
Most of the time, I would say no. It's great, well, at least punctuation to separate what is an instruction from an expectation, from an objective. But if you've missed an S or an I and the word is still obvious what it should be, no, it should be fine. Unless you're picking words and had an error in a word that resemble another that has a completely different meaning. Other than that, no, it should be fine. It's context aware. That's the semantic search capability piece of it. You should be able to figure out what you meant as long as it's a small error.
Okay, great questions. Thank you for the answers, Elias.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on to the prompt engineering techniques. We've selected 6 and we'll go through each and every single one of them, and you see that it's a good illustration that you can change the order of context and objective depending on what you're trying to achieve. Let's start with the first one of my favorite one being the role play. This would come at the beginning of your prompt. It's a context prompt engineering techniques. And here what you're trying to do is ask or tell your language model to emulate a specific worker or persona. So you can either have it emulate yourself, so you would provide your industry, your role, function, and also geography. Otherwise, you can provide a profile of someone who would be very competent and able to respond to your requests. Sometimes you want it to act as you, but you can have it act like a leader, like anyone that you think would be more suited to give you the best response for this. Let's see a quick example. We would start a prompt with, let's say, we're telling Copilot, we're telling ChatGPT, we're telling our tool who it is. You are an IT leader with over 15 years of experience in the public sector. So we have role, we have industry, specifically in Health Canada, geography towards Canada. And just this will allow your generative AI tool to access the training data or the data that is the most pertinent for this role. You can be an IT leader in so many industries. Now we've reduced it to public sector and even more specifically health and even more specifically to Canada. So the response is more likely to be pertinent for someone in the public sector, working in the health ministry in Canada. Now you can ask your question, how do you assess effectiveness of a cash flow management strategy? It will give you a response. Here are the leading practices, several key steps. And then you can ask, well, in that context, we've built up the context so far, and then we're asking the real question, the real prompt. In that context, I want you to review the following cash flow management strategy in this file, or something that you copy paste. At this point, you're going to get a response that is much more contextually aware of what you're trying to do. Let's take an example of what it would look like actually on the screen. So we're going to start the prompt. IT leader, over 15 years of experience, Health Canada. What are the steps to review, manage cash flow management strategy? There you go. We're getting a series of about 6, 7 steps. And from there, we can actually ask it to review something that we already had. So before even asking the real prompt, we want to attach a file, and here we're showing Copilot, but this can be done on ChatGPT, it could be done on other tools, depending what you're using. But here we're asking our actual prompt at this, actually the actual task we wanted to achieve, we're asking it at the second prompt. And here it's giving us some great feedback on how to improve our budgeting and forecasting, how to monitor improve monitoring and reporting. It's giving us strength feedback. This is good, this is not good. It's pointing you to the right directions here. So that's role play. Essentially, we're building context and we're having it be as pertinent as we can before giving it the actual task we're trying to achieve. Number 2, chain of thought prompting. And the goal here is to try to have the model explain to us its reasoning. We want it to be more transparent and force it to follow either a series of steps or provide to us the reasoning. And we can ask then the model how it got to this answer or got to this point. So here, it's a very effective technique to kind of avoid having hallucinations. Why? Because we're forcing the model to be transparent, or at the very least, we're forcing it to explain itself. And oftentimes, whenever it's hallucinating, it will go back on the data and tell you, okay, sorry, I was wrong. Here's what I actually came up with. So for everyone who's worried about hallucination, that's an effective technique. The most effective technique is still looking at the source document and the source of the file or reference it's sharing. Oftentimes you can ask for a chain of thought, or you can ask for references. Okay, where did you get this information? Or have it be grounded in a set of information that you trust. Oftentimes, the tools that we use right now are connected to the web. So as long as you force it to, at the very least, use some sources of data that you trust or provide to you the sources of data that it used, you're less likely to have hallucinations. So let's take a look at an example here for chain of thought. Let's say we're an auditor in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency, and we want to analyze an ESG report, and we want to identify the variances. The first step of chain of thought is having described in details an auditing framework, including intermediate steps. So here, it won't give you a black box response. It will give you, okay, here's what I'm proposing, and here's the detail, and here's the intermediate steps. All of that in bullet point format. And we'll give you then a first series of steps to analyze the variances, step 1, 2, 3. And at the end of this, you can ask it to provide its reasoning and describe why it suggested these steps. Let's take a look at what this actually looks like. So same prompt as earlier, you're an auditor in this agency. You're tasked to do an analysis on this ESG report, and you want to describe to me an auditing framework. Include this, include that. Let's have it go. Here, immediately complying, giving us 4, 5, 6, all the way to 7 steps. This is our auditing framework. So it's not just, okay, assess the risk, explaining to you or giving you a question as to why you should do this or that. Planning, preparation, identifying key stakeholder, identify risk, evaluate materiality, collect the data, compare the reported figures with actual data that you have from your system. So far, pretty high level. We can ask for more details, but at this point, we just want a reasoning as to why I propose this framework. And there you go, it will comply. So the first step of planning and preparation, it's giving you a lot more context, a lot more information. So let's say for gathering background information, important to understand the current ESG policies in previous reports. You want to identify the key stakeholders so that you can ensure you have access to the necessary information, because most of the time the information is withheld within some key stakeholders. Whoops, that went back. And as you move forward into more complex steps, this is where it's very useful to have it, not just so that you avoid hallucination, but it's also a way to kind of convince yourself, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get your AI to help you do something that you already do faster. And the same way you would do with a colleague or someone who's just been onboarded who's helping you out with something, if you're not understanding something, you would ask why. Just why? Why did you propose this? Okay, can you tell me about your reasoning why you think this is a good idea? It's the same, essentially, way of interacting with humans that we're tending to do more and more with AI. Asking simple questions that we don't even realize sometimes we do with our colleagues. Coming in with someone handing you a report, someone in your team, someone just onboarded. Ask, okay, how did you do it? And why did you arrive to this conclusion? Same here. To reassess the risk, you're getting the why you should do this. For communicate findings, it's explaining to you why, and it's a way to shed some light on the black box that generative AI tools often have. All right, moving up to number 3, zero shots and few shots prompting. So everyone, you may already know what it is without even doing it. Essentially, the aim is to simply include examples or references. 1 or 2 examples would be few shot. If you've never provided any example of what you're trying to achieve to your AI tool, well, just means you're using zero shot. Let's say that zero shot is by default. Sometimes it's helpful whenever we're not sure what we're trying to achieve. But if we know exactly what we want to do, say we want to update the resume, add a new experience, well, this should follow the actual template of your resume, right? It's not something that you're not sure what you're trying to get. You're trying to update something that's existing. Let's see what it looks like. So zero shot would be the example at the top. We want to create a set of comprehensive sentences to highlight my new experience and update my resume. And what you would do is skip a line and say you would copy paste your note. I've done this for this project, so on and so forth. It will then give you just a sentence highlighting your new experience, but this sentence might not be following the current CV or your current resume structure. Let's say we're using few shots prompting. Here, what you can do is just give the tool a set of examples. The same thing, you want to create sentences highlighting your new experience, update your resume, and you're adding that you want it to format it and give a tone that is based on the following examples. Then you can copy paste examples. Remember to separate your context from your objective. Here you can see I skipped a line and said, okay, example 1, conducted an analysis of XYZ. Example 2, led a transformation project. So the AI, what it will try to do is take your notes from that new experience and try to format it and phrase it in a very similar way than the example 1 and 2 that you've provided. Now you're getting closer to a more relevant result. That's few shots prompting. And the last way to do few shots prompting, and now more and more tools give you that option, is to simply upload the file. So instead of copy pasting some examples, sometimes, it's useful, it's quicker, it depends on your use case, but same context. We have a new experience. We have a bunch of chaotic notes of that new experience. And say we want to update our CV or resume. Well, in this case, you can just upload your resume and say, okay, here's my resume. I'm trying to update it. Here's the new experience I'd like you to fit in. And we'll then give you a text that is very likely to be usable immediately to update your resume. So zero shot, few shots. Zero shot is pretty basic. It's by default, but few shot could be very, very powerful. Depends on the tool you're having. Sometimes you don't have a choice of doing copy pasting, but oftentimes if you wanted to follow a certain structure, a certain template, and you have this in a file, just upload the file and make sure you precise that you want the response to fit within the tone, the structure, the style of this file. Let's see what it looks like. Create a comprehensive sentence to highlight my new experience and my resume. Great. So what I will do now is skip a line, and essentially I've added here my notes, and it's giving me some pretty big paragraphs. That's not what I'm looking to do. So what I'm doing is, okay, start from scratch. And here, instead of giving example, I am giving it an existing resume. So uploading the resume, copy pasting my notes, and there you go. Now it's following the CV structure. 1 to 3 with sub-bullet points is exactly what the CV looks like. And now I can more easily copy paste this within my resume. So see the difference? You're giving an example. It's not running as wild. It's trying to follow the structure, the tone itself within the document. Number 4, least to most prompting. And this one, very, very interesting. And if you ask me, it very much so resembles the chain of thought, but it's different. What you're doing here is that you're breaking a problem into sub-problem, and each response for a step is the input for the next step. And it's very much so a technique inspired by, teachers and the real-world educational strategies for children. I'm sure a lot of you have passed some exams, midterms, or final, where response A is the input for question B. And this is pretty much what we're trying to mimic with your generative AI tools. Here, you want to explicitly give them a series of steps to follow. And sometimes, if you know that the data volume is, I would say, low or not too big rather, well, then you can put that in one prompt. Step 1, I want you to understand the key proposal and changes based on this document. Step 2, analyze the financial implications. Step 3, all the way to step 6, and you're giving it essentially a trail to follow. If not, you can, we'll see in the next technique, use another technique that's called prompt chaining, where you kind of do the same, but you're breaking it in smaller pieces. Here, it's least to most, where you're going at it like a funnel, and that you will know that each step will be an intake for each step's output will be an input for the next step. Let's see what it looks like here. Let's say we want to draft a comprehensive memo highlighting the key findings and implication of the budget report of 2024. And we wanted to follow the following steps to ensure a thorough and detailed strategy. And oftentimes, the steps you would follow yourself, you're just putting this in writing for your new, let's say, colleague, virtual colleague to follow. Step 1, all the way to step 6. And it could be 3 steps, it could be 4 or 5, and you can iterate. If you see that the response is not what it should be, then maybe you can split those steps or make it simpler, have it go byte per byte. So here, identify potential challenges, prepare a comprehensive summary, compiling all of the details that were summarized before, and we'll have it go. Of course, here we're in a context where we can upload a file. We'll do so and have it attack. Looking through the information, we gave it quite a bit of steps. So the fact that it's a bit slower, if you ask me, is a good sign. It means it's thinking. It's trying to follow each step. Okay, I've done with step 1, 2, 3, all the way to 4. And it's responding based on the structure we gave it. And here, the response is much, much more pertinent because we told it exactly what to do. It didn't have to assume. That's the big difference. There's a lot of processing power, but if you're able to, quote unquote, unload the AI for some decision and have it essentially follow somewhat of a workflow, you will get more specific response and pretty much very, very usable response. And from here, you can use any other techniques that we've seen so far. Each techniques can be used with one or the other, sometimes all at the same time. So highly, highly recommend the chain of thought. And whenever least to most, and whenever least to most might not be working as great as we want it to, well, then this is where prompt chaining can come into play. And you'll see that it's very similar, but not quite the same. Here, what we're trying to do is accomplish a very complex task where you know the model is struggling or might struggle. What we've done right before would be essentially a very detailed prompt, and everyone can agree. And in the previous one, the goal was rather to use every task or subtask as an input for the very next one. In this case, we're doing the same, but just splitting it piece by piece. So let's see what it looks like. Let's say we need help to answer a detailed question regarding generative AI tool from a specific file. And the first step would be to extract stats and direct quotes. So before doing something big like a categorization, we want to start with extraction. Okay, first extract all stats and direct quotes, regardless of what they mean. It will comply. Here are the stats, here are the quotes. And that works specifically when the document is huge. If you have, say, 300 pages, you don't want the capabilities to, be underused or overused. You want to go at it piece by piece. First piece is, okay, extract everything that resembles this. And once this is extracted, then you can reuse the capabilities, fresh capabilities, to have them categorized into different themes or make sure it's aligned with something or a theme. So keep that in mind. The prompt training is a way to kind of address sometimes the limited bandwidth or capacity. Not so much the reasoning. The reasoning stays the same, but really it's a matter of bandwidth, of not burning too much gas, because most tools, well, they're limited in some way, shape, or form. Some of them have different pricing model, but that's not the point. There's oftentimes a matter of bandwidth of capacity. So your way of going over or beyond that is to use one of those techniques to be more specific, to add more context, or to just have it go piece by piece, task by task. Prompt training is one of the most useful techniques that is likely to be the one you also use by default. You ask a first question, then another one, then another one. It's like going at it like you would with the funnel. Let's take a quick look at it now. So in this context, we're rather asking about a meeting, a very, very long meeting, something that was over 2.5 hours, and there's a lot of words. We're still showing a demo with Copilot because it's grounded in work data, but here you can see that we're asking the following question. I want to learn more about generative AI prompting, given the information in this meeting. Your first task is to generate the bullet point list of all the major topics covered in this meeting. So here, what we're doing is starting with a very wide question. Okay, just take a look at everything and give me the list of all the major topics. And here, it's giving me quite a big list. Okay, introduction, license, transcription, resources, Teams, Word. Now, we want to be more specific. Given this list of topics covered, can you please provide a 3-point summary of what was discussed on each topic? Make sure it's aligned with the previous response and easy to read for the uninitiated. Now that you've used this first run, let's say, you've used a bit of the bandwidth to cover all the major topics. Now you're asking it to run at it again and give you 3 points summarizing each topic covered. But here you're handling the capacity. Instead of asking this from the get-go, we're asking a first task is to extract everything, then go over everything and give me a response. And oftentimes, this is very helpful to go through a huge amount of data. Here, we're going at it like a funnel. All the topics, now give me 3 bullet points for each. And now I want you to elaborate on prompting specifically. I want to understand the key strategies and examples of how these techniques are applied in real-world scenarios. And then it will go at it with another run. So each run is limited, but you can have it go for a run pretty much indefinitely until it gives you what you want. But keep that in mind always. The concept of capacity is very critical for most tools you'll be using, whether at home or at work. If there is a price, there is a limit. You can be sure of that. All right. Maybe take a quick break anytime. I don't know if there are a lot of questions that we could maybe address.
There are a ton of questions, so I've been keeping them for you to go through all of the strategies, but we can go through. Let's start, and then we'll continue as we go through. So one of the questions that came up is AI and the ability to provide its sources? Can we prompt it to provide its sources and then access those?
I think you must ask it to provide its sources. The best way to avoid hallucinations. Most of the tools that are plugged into the internet are capable of doing so. If not, in 2025, I would say it's a red flag if you're not capable of accessing it, because even if you were to ask for its reasoning and the source it got this from, well, if it's not capable of giving you this information, that you have no ways of double checking it. Let's say it's not plugged in the internet, it's giving you some stats. Ask it to give you the source material or the report or the study this was used to give you that result, and go look at it yourself. But today, most tools, they give you their sources, but sometimes it might hallucinate a little bit. So I would always ask you to ask for the sources. If it's not giving it to you from the get-go, if it's not capable of giving you the sources, at least a way to confirm this information. It's very critical. The human in the loop is more than critical to make sure it's not hallucinating.
And I do notice just a note for the tools when we use it from an internal perspective, it'll link the documents as well at the bottom of the results, so that you can access those as well. I do that
Absolutely.
often. Are we better to so let's say you're referencing a common document, let's say the Canada annual report. Are we better to reference that in a generic sense, or actually link specifically either to the document, or even better, is it better to actually link, let's say, a PDF version of that document? Will it give similar results regardless of how we input that source?
I would say for more recent documents, you're way better off just giving it either the link to the document or uploading the file. Either way, you want the model to access the source material. Otherwise, you're relying on its training or its current knowledge. And oftentimes, the current knowledge is not up to date. Latest versions of GPT are up to 2024. Very few of them are up to 2025, or at the very least, they're up to January or February. We're already or almost in May today. So you cannot rely on, let's say, the core or the trained data it's using. This is good for reasoning, but in general, if you're trying to get an update on something that just came out, a report, I would highly advise linking it to it. Either
Good.
uploading or giving it the website, or if it has web search capabilities.
Great, thanks. This came up and it's not specific to prompting, but I thought relevant in terms of providing an answer. So chats versus agents, we're talking a lot about prompting within chats. Can you just speak very briefly, and we did touch on this in the last couple sessions, but the difference between chats and agents and when to use them?
Brilliant question. Well, when you think of chats, they're usually more generic chatbots. They can be grounded in specific data, but they're meant to rather accelerate you. You're still the main driver, and you will have your chat to support you in a task or anything that you already do, to have the chance to do it faster and better. So let's say that chats are for people, agents are for processes. So whenever you think of chat, you can think of accelerating your work. When you think of agent, we're getting closer to automating some of the work, because agents are meant to execute tasks and follow a workflow. So an agent usually has actions, it has triggers. Whereas chats, you are the trigger and you do yourself the action. So let's say we're using a chat to, say, review an email. On the chat, you can ask the question to review an email. You can draft a response. You'll copy paste your response and send it. The agent will do the sending itself. So you're kind of skipping some step or automating some steps with an agent. So I would say that the agents are rather an evolutions of what chats are, because behind your chat, you will have an agent. So if I were to summarize, chat is for people, for users, where agents are for processes. They can be accessible through the chat. So the chat would be the UI, and behind the chat, you'd have agent. But just to differentiate classic generative AI with regular chats and generative AI agents, we're getting closer to automating tasks and creating a workflow with the agent to support you with.
Excellent. A lot of questions or comments around ethical considerations. So we do have, I'll just direct people to the Q&A and answers related to environmental impacts, ethical considerations. But is there anything specific to prompting that you want to highlight in those two spaces, Idris, or do you feel nothing really to add there beyond what we've already included in those resources?
I would say that, again, it's really depending on the tools you're using. Most of the tools that are free are not really free. Your data is, the currency. So it's a question for both user and organizations. I would say that from a user perspective, the way you can use AI in an ethical manner, in a responsible manner, is multiple ways of answering that. The first one would be, using techniques to make sure that the information is not a hallucination. So using different ways for you to confirm and validate the information. That's something that you need to do, because at the end of the day, it's not the chatbot name at the end of your email, it's your name. So you want to make sure that you don't use it in a way that could be seen as a way that you would lose some credibility. It's funny because someone did mention in the training I was giving earlier that they can detect whenever it's a ChatGPT written email, and those people are losing a lot of credibility, because you can say that, okay, they've kind of automated a task and lost a bit of that human touch. Another way is to be aware of, the consumption it could use in terms of electricity, and maybe avoid using AI to ask for the weather, whereas you have platforms that already do that. So there are so many ways of tackling, the ethics and the responsible usage of AI. From an organization's perspective, it's about selecting the right AI with the right trusted governance and trusted way of doing so. And there's so many frameworks to do so. So I would say that from a user perspective, people here today are users. Try to use it for important tasks, high value added tasks, not so much to ask for the weather, whereas you have tools that already do that. And always review it so that you don't lose your own credibility, and by extension, the credibility of the organization you're working with or for.
Excellent. So a couple more specific questions that I tried to group together. So when we're prompting, do others have access to the prompts that I've inputted, others within my organization or externally facing?
No, usually no, but it depends again on the tool. If you're using ChatGPT, well, maybe that in the ChatGPT free version, that data is used to retrain the model. That's for sure. So, so it means that maybe down the line someone could access it, but I don't see who has time to look at billions of prompts at a time. However, let's say we're talking about enterprise grade solution or enterprise friendly, say Copilot. Well, Copilot, everyone has its own Copilot. No one can access your prompt besides yourself, not your colleagues, no one. However,
so even
yeah,
Idris, within an organization, they're not my prompts are not training my organization specific LLM.
no,
Okay.
no, because the LLM's training is really from a third party. It's like Copilot, for instance, has the same motor as ChatGPT. It's the same AI engine, but this engine is not being trained with the work data. What's getting better is the data the model is accessing. So usually the contract for enterprise grade generative AI solution is that the model will not learn from the data. Your data is getting better, so the model is accessing better quality of data and providing you with better results. But the models are being trained by the quote unquote owners or manufacturers. We're talking ChatGPT, OpenAI does the training. It's not using the training of your organization, the usage of your organization, unless you're using a public generative AI tool with sensitive information, which is absolutely not recommended, and if I dare say so, forbidden. It will not do so. So just make sure that you're using the right tool for the right purpose. Usually for work purposes, the tools are vetted by your organization. You can use this tool and not this tool, and it comes with a set of guidelines. So again, depending on the tool, but usually you have policies that would follow the usage of each tool within your organization.
Okay, so still in the realm of sort of the specific questions, the chat history within, let's say, Copilot, how long do we have access to that history? Is it what's the life cycle of the history that it that it presents?
Say Copilot, it really depends on your internal policies for data conservation. So for some companies, they've set it at 45 days, other 90. It's a variable that could be updated based on your company or organization's policies. So it depends again.
Okay. This was a good question, I thought, in terms of personas. So stating to the AI who you are, your role, and is
Yeah.
that something, so in prompting, obviously relevant, but is that something that the AI can then save for all future chats with the AI, so it knows who you are, what your role is, and any question that you ask it, is it going to be in context of that role?
I love this question, and I think a lot of people will dislike me for this answer. It depends. It depends. Let's take the example of ChatGPT. ChatGPT now remembers everything that you say, meaning that if you stated somewhere that you're this role, it will remember it for the rest. What you can do to create a personalized version, let's take the example of Copilot. If you wanted to do this on Copilot, you would have to create an agent specific to a task and access this agent, which is a somewhat personalized version of Copilot. Because keep in mind, you have multiple versions of agent. You can have a retrieval agent that just looks for specific information. You can have a task agent that essentially takes action on some tasks, sending an email, creating a report. And then you have autonomous agents that are almost fully autonomous, where the human is more removed from the loop. In the context of a retrieval agent, you're just looking to find more information. You can, whenever you configure this agent, set your role, and this agent will always remember it. So again, I'm giving this example so that we differentiate some application, because they're each trying to do something great, something new. They all know they all look like the same. They're trying to get an edge. ChatGPT now remembers everything, but you can still create an agent within it. On Copilot, which is fueled by the same engine as ChatGPT, but it's not necessarily the same architecture in the back where the data flows. Microsoft had to put in some limits and constraints for compliance for enterprise grade requirement. So it really depends, but you can essentially make it happen. It's just depending on your solution. If you're on Copilot, you can create an agent that will always remember the task you're doing and who you are. On other solutions, say ChatGPT, the feature just came out about a couple of weeks ago that it remembers everything about all the conversation. So again, tool dependent.
Interesting. Do we want to take a break from the questions and go to the last Menti just to break things up a little
Yes.
bit? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I do have a
Okay,
last
go ahead.
prompt engineering
Sorry.
technique, and this one, no, it's
I got
fine.
overwhelmed. Okay, go ahead.
This one is my
Excited. Go ahead. Thanks,
favorite.
Eli.
My pleasure. Thank you, Anita. Interactive context enhancement. It's a fancy name just to say, have it ask you the relevant question. So here, the way we use this technique is by essentially asking your tool to ask itself the relevant question to make sure it's understanding the context or the assignment. That's often helpful where you're not sure how to phrase it. So you're going to give it a minimum objective and context and have it ask you the question. And once it's generating those questions, you can then reply to each question with more detail. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say we want to compare two contracts. We're telling it, okay, I'll be sharing two contracts and I want you to identify the differences. But before doing so, I want you to ask me 3 questions to make sure you understand what I'm trying to do. It's responding, okay, great. What specific sections or clauses in the contract you want me to pay extra attention to? Is there any potential concerns or potential discrepancies that you're already aware of? And is there a deadline for completing this review? Is there any formatting or presentation preferences? And from this, you can respond to each of those 3 questions. Okay, I'm looking for a detailed comparison of each section, areas of concern, so and so. Let's take a look, everyone, at what this looks like. So I have 2 contracts, beautiful, and of course, fake contracts, one in French, one in English. They're the same, or they're supposed to be the same. So what we're trying to do is compare them both. Using the same prompt, you'll be shared 2 contracts to review. You need to identify differences and notable discrepancies. It's giving us the 3 questions we've seen earlier, and we can respond to each of those questions in as much detail as we want. So are there any specific sections? Not really. I want you to take a look at everything. Is there any areas of concern? Well, not so much, but I don't care about formatting differences. I want you to focus on numerical and cementing the discrepancies rather than formatting. Because if we ask for a full comparison, it can tell you, yeah, you skipped a line here, but not on this one. Not interesting for us. Last but not least, purpose of the review, no deadline, but we want a bullet point formatting to say, this is no good, this is no good. And what I really like here is that it's asking you again, okay, here's a summary of what I understand. Should I proceed or is there anything else I should know? And then we give it the go. Proceed with the review. And here are the documents. Number 1, number 2. And you'll see that the analysis is essentially very pertinent as to what I asked. So it went over each section, giving me an overview of each of the differences. So for the engagement team, it includes the same members, but the titles or roles are translated into French. That's fine. Sometimes there are discrepancies. Professional fees. Okay, great. This one is in USD, whereas this one is in Canadian. That's no good. No good. And also you have a 10% discount, whereas here you have a 15% discount. But every time you see a bullet point, it means discrepancy. Terms and conditions. They cover similar causes, but difference in wording and some additional clauses for member firms and third-party service provider. That's huge. Is there anything else that's worth mentioning? Risk mitigation. Yes. This one is stating that the risk mitigation activities will start after the project starts, whereas this one states before the project starts. See here, we're not just talking about differences as number. This one says 10%, this one is 15. We're also getting into semantical differences, something that for a legal contract could be very, very troublesome. So here, the secret of the prompt is literally asking the model to ask us itself the relevant questions for us to give it the relevant context, because sometimes we're just not sure of what we're trying to do until we're being asked the question in the proper way. So here, every section that you see here has a slight difference before the project starts, after the project starts, terms and condition, and this is just the first version. If we want to have more details, we can ask for more details at this point. All right, everyone, thanks for bearing with us. Let's go over to one last Menti. I'll ask everyone again to play the game. Pull out your phones, scan this beautiful QR code, and respond to the question. All right, this time is a charm. So which techniques do you guys think are already using or already have naturally integrated into your learning?
Idris, while we wait for the answers, a lot of questions are still coming, and we talked about this in the review of the techniques themselves, but do you want to just highlight the ones or anything that we should use to avoid hallucinations in particular?
Brilliant, love the question. I would say the chain of thought. Because we're asking, with the chain of thought, we're asking the question, why? Or how? How did you come up with this response? What is your reasoning and why? Chain of thought, I think, is the one that addresses the most. And really, each techniques can be used for different purposes, sometimes all together. I see a lot of good comments. Prompt chaining is great for reports, definitely agree. At least to most is for it to force a series of steps to be followed, role plays to give it some more context. So what I would say to essentially go over hallucination would be chain of thought. And within chain of thought, you can tell it to absolutely give you the references. Also, you can use expectations. It's part of the pillars to say only use sources that are relevant for this. Only use sources from trustworthy organizations. Only use this kind of information within my files. And you want to make sure that it's at the very least giving you an indication that it used a trustworthy source of data to avoid hallucination. Hallucinations really come from the fact that it will use its internal knowledge to come up with something. But as long as you can plug it to external data, external from its own knowledge base, from the pre-trained data, you're very much less likely to get hallucination. Not to say you will get zero, you're way, way less likely. Brilliant. Chain of thought, prompt chaining. These are the two that are used the most whenever it's getting difficult. Highly recommend interactive context enhancement. Role play is great to set the tone as well for a task that is very specific. But let's say you're just summarizing a report or reviewing an email. You don't have to use role play really. And beware, sometimes you will see that it will give you links and those links do not exist. Just click on it and see where it leads. If the link is dead, it's a red flag. And sometimes it could even hallucinate within the content of the link, trying to extrapolate some information. So just make sure that you don't remember your role whenever you're using AI. You're the final decider. AI, you should see it really as, you know, a colleague working with or for you, rather for you. And before you publish or use the results of that colleague, well, then I highly recommend reviewing the result, reviewing the source material, reviewing the answer, using one of those techniques to essentially just reason with yourself and make sure that you can yourself defend this response if you were asked to, because that could happen. You use AI to generate the summary of your report. Someone comes to you. Why did you write this? You cannot say, well, it's the AI who wrote this and I just used it. That's how you lose credibility. So keep that in mind, everyone.
We had a couple other specific questions, Idriss. One that I think is worth asking. It's specific, but to reference a document, just how do you do that easily within, let's say, Copilot, the backslash functionality, if we just want to highlight that for users?
Of course. Well, again, depends on the solution. Usually it's a drag and drop. If you're on ChatGPT, if you're on Copilot, you can drag and drop the file. Otherwise, Copilot's a bit more integrated within your work environment. So you have a button that states add content, and it's the same as doing the backslash. It will open up a window and you can type one of the keywords in the title of your document. It will appear on a window, then you can click on it and you'll see it attached. So either drag and drop, either use the inherent functionality of the tools to find the document. Oftentimes those documents have to be on the cloud somewhere.
And if we upload a document, Idriss, is that saved somewhere, or is it discarded after we use it in the prompt?
Depends really. Let's take the example ChatGPT. You can upload a document in a temporary conversation, meaning you can upload, use the document, and afterwards you can scrap the conversation. Copilot, it will automatically save it on a OneDrive or a SharePoint. So again, everyone, you'll hate me for that. It depends on the tool. I'm sorry, but you have ways of doing that, of course.
Excellent. I think we've answered a lot of the questions that came up. If there's anything last minute questions that we have in the last minute or two, but if not, David, I don't know if you want to close out the session. I redirect also to the Q&A. I think a lot of those will be reiterated in those sections as well.
Well, I'm going to start, Anita, by saying that this is one of the most highly engaging groups we've encountered. We had over 200 questions in the Q&A and about 150 in the chat. We are doing our best to get to them. I do want to thank Idriss for the presentation and Anita for managing the questions, but behind the scenes, I also want to thank Shannon, Lisa, and Juliana, who've done their best to try and answer the questions. I'm going to go over them with my team, and I will try and speak to some of them at our last session, which is coming up, which is use cases for the public sector next week. Some great examples from around the world. I do want to wish all of our federal friends best of luck with your transition. We hope everything goes well. We'll be watching, see what happens in the next few days and, of course, coming weeks. And, of course, I do really appreciate the comments about the importance of people maintaining their skills and improving their skills and not becoming too dependent. My children love to receive mail, and so I do send them cards, and I write them all by myself. Lastly, we at IPAC are cheering for all NHL teams. We do not have any favorites. I know Anita has a favorite, but we hope all your teams do well. And thank you again, everybody, for participating, for the incredible number of questions. The engagement is amazing, and we will do our best to try and circle back next week around this. So join us next week for use cases of the public sector. We have some great examples from around the world. Again, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.